So stay tuned. I'm gonna do a drive to get some food. Just so you know, it's not AI. I'm not AI. And so the the message that's coming up is gonna be pretty interesting. I'm just gonna be real with y'all. Just gonna be real. All right. So after I got saved, I saw this my whole life. And even actually before I got saved, people underestimate you. Because I remember I'm going to college. And I had family. I was the first one in my family to go to college. He said, "Oh, you don't need to go to college. What are you talking about? What is college? And what's the purpose? And all that stuff." And once you finish college, you realize, in a way, they write it to a degree, but because you don't end up in the field that you studied, but the stuff that you studied. I need some gas. The stuff that you studied actually helped you have a more round vision of an overview of life, to a degree. It's a shame they don't teach you stuff really in high school that you need. It's a crying shame. I got a fly on the window. Look at that. Hey, I'm doing 35 and he's still hanging on. He's hanging on for life, But after I got saved, I noticed, so I got saved after I went to college. When I went to college, I went for math and mathematics, electrical engineering. And I had to take programming, Fortran, and physics 1, 2, and 3, calculus 1, 2, and 3, differential equations, advanced math, and all that stuff. And so electrical, I studied circuits, all the basic electrical classes, 2 or 3 years of electrical. I ended up just transferring and getting my math degree, so I'm pretty much electrical engineering is under my belt, but I just didn't get the degree. But I got a minor in it. And so anyway, long story short, I remember when I first got married, it was all about, I didn't know this about her. She put on like she was normal, but it was all about outward show. My mama is this, and my daddy is this, and we ran a restaurant, and we did this, and it was all about what they did. Wanted to get the praise and the worship, But actually, praise and worship goes to Jesus. It doesn't go to a bloodline. I'm this bloodline, we did this, we had this business and all that. Okay, so you had a little bit of money. Yeah, but what about your heart? Is your heart right? Hold on a second. I'll tell you how things work out for me. So I got a bunch of junk I want to clean out of another property, and it's just full of junk, and I just don't want to do it. And this guy here driving this, I was telling him, if they were on the stock market, I'd invest. He said, well, I got a little business where I'm hauling junk. If you want to invest in me, I'll come over there and haul your junk off, And I said, okay, I'll meet you over there. So I said at a good price. And if he's just starting out, he's probably going to give me a good price. But anyway, that's how things work out as I was getting gas at the gas station. And so let me go back to this. This is important, what I'm getting ready to say. And those people who are stuck in the materialistic, pride, ego, family bloodline paradigm, y'all won't hear me because y'all are just stuck in you just don't wake up. And so I remember my first wife's, they had a lot of pride and ego because of money, and I had a good job working with a phone company, so that's why she married me. It wasn't based on love, it was based on image and shower show and money. And that was before the internet, by the way, but I could decode it, so I pretty much kicked her out. But she had to make me look like the bad guy to family and friends and everybody, because I wouldn't put up with fake love, If it ain't real love, don't do it. If you don't love what you do, don't do it. And so back to what I was saying. So this outward show, image, look at me, I drive an electric car, I'm the best, and look at the image and all that stuff. It's stupid. nobody really cares. But I remember we went to her brother-in-law's house, and he was talking about, he was an electrician, and he was talking about electrical stuff. And my wife said, you didn't say anything. Why didn't you say something? You know electrical like the back of your hand. I said, I know. I was just listening. She was mad because I wouldn't say anything, because she wanted to be like, wanted people to think, oh, I'm this great whatever. She married this great dude or whatever because he's got some knowledge. And I told her, I said her name. I said, look, I don't need to impress anybody. I'm not that kind of person. I said, I know, he was talking about, you know, the surface area, and I know Ohm's law. I could have asked him, do you know Ohm's law? Do you know Kirchhoff's voltage law? Do you know how to solve a circuit? Do you know how the current flows in the wires? Do you understand the right-hand rule? Do you understand the stuff hidden behind it? I like to look at source. My dad was a carpenter, and you know, we built decks. I helped him build decks for a season, and he said, just use the 3-4-5 rule. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I said, okay. He said, how'd you know about that? Well, that's math. That's just basic math. And he said, oh. I said, it's the Pythagorean theorem. He said, what's that? He didn't know why 3-4-5 worked. And the reason it works is because it's the Pythagorean theorem. 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. It's been a long time, but it's, in other words, you can derive it. 3-4-5 gives you a right angle. It tests to see if it's a right angle, a right triangle. And so when you're building a deck, you use the 3-4-5 rule. You can eyeball it and measure it if it's something you're doing on your own. You don't really need to do that. But anyway, all these things that are surface, I studied to know what's going on underneath. But the average Joe, the average person just sees the surface and they're like amazed. But when you study what's going on behind the scene, that's a different story. And I don't need to say I'm this smart or I'm prideful or I'm this or I got this, or I don't need to say that. And for the most part, I don't. You work with people for many, many years. You work with people for 15 years or whatever, and they don't even know you. And they say something and you're like, yeah, well, that's easy, but I'm not going to be derogatory to your lack of knowledge, you know. Anyway, so you look at the surface, but you want to know what's underneath it. That's been in my whole demeanor my whole life. And I've studied everything under the sun that I could study. Math, engineering, carpentry, building, appliance repair, how it works, the electrical, the plumbing, the heating and air, the heat pump, you know, the evaporator, the condenser, how the compressor works, the metering device, how it's, I've studied all of it that came to my face. I've studied it. I wanted to know it. And when I get focused on one thing, I study it till I learn it, you know. If I don't want to learn it, I don't care. I don't study it, but I like to look at the overview of it and see what it's saying. And if I can see the overview pattern, I can see it's the same. Like building that bridge is no different than building the trusses on that bridge, are no bit different than building the trusses on a house over there. It's the same principle. So you don't need to study every discipline to know each discipline, because this is a fractal hologram, you know. And so so the last 4 or 5 years I've been studying medical because I wanted to understand medical. And the medical's not that hard either. I'm not a doctor, you know. I can't do what a doctor does, or a nurse, you know, taking blood, stuff like that. But I know the basics of how it works, you know. Pressure formula, PV is equal to nRT, right? So taking blood pressure. I know how the machines work and how they're checking blood pressure and all that, but I don't want to go in the medical field. Just talking about it gives me the bejeebies, or whatever you would call it. Just like, ugh. But I studied it to understand the vitamins and the minerals and the amino acids and all that stuff. and what you need, and how this part. I just study the research papers of people who are into that. For longevity, it's all about longevity. And so I'm getting to a point. My point is this. So I did that with the Bible too. I wanted to know the root. There has to be a root to the Bible. And I prayed. And I saw all these flesh creatures acting crazy. And I saw people around me who were not born again. And I said, Lord, what's going on? It seems like the devil's team is winning, but I know they're not. And so he showed me the root to this reality. It took me 7 years to decode it, but I still stayed on it for 13 years. And so the issue with this reality, the root issue, is the flesh versus the spirit. And so the flesh creatures are in pride and ego and arrogance, and they think they know it all, and they're not willing to learn from other people. And I've studied every doctrine that I could think of, but I first studied the Bible. The Jesuits study all the other doctrines, and then they study the Bible. And I went the opposite. I knew my Bible before I studied false teachers. Why would you study the false teachers and then study the real? I studied the real and got grounded in the real. Then I could study the false teachers and bust them in like one sentence, So I saw people who are still in the flesh mind, the old Adamic nature, the old Eve, the old Adam, who are stuck on surface. They only care that bridge holds them up. They don't care how many PSIs that holds, or they don't care how much pressure it holds, and how many pillars and how many beams you need, and how much the PSI of the concrete is. They don't care about that. They don't care about the tension or anything of the bridge. They just want the bridge to work. They don't care what the engineer does behind the scene. But behind the scene, there's an engineer who wants to know how the forces work. Force is equal to mass times acceleration, right? And so then you got the scientists who want to know what's the chemical makeup of all that, or the electrons and the atoms and all that. Then you got the mathematicians that give people the math to be able to do that. So at the root of doing engineering is math. At the root of physics is math. Math is always at the root. But the root of math is the language, and people don't realize that. So I went into etymology. I studied etymology. I broke the words down into their parts, the letters, the alphabet, everything. I didn't know where I was going because nobody's ever talked about it in any universities or anything online. So I just trusted God, and I just kept meditating on it. I did have somebody help me. She's on the other side of the country, and we decoded this place together for many years. And thank God I had somebody, a companion, via email to help for all those years, because it helped me. And the word companion is C-O-M, pan, together bread, breaking bread. So a companion is somebody that you break bread with, and breaking bread could be symbolic of having somebody to do stuff with, And so God sent somebody to help me get jump started, because I knew something. And then I ended up going my own. I got jump started, and then I went my way of code, and she stayed in her way, but my code influenced her, hers influenced mine. But I kept going back to the Bible with my code, because I knew that the Bible's the truth, and any kind of code has to line up with the scripture. And actually the word code is codex, which is book, which is biblia, which is Bible. And so the Bible is the codex of this reality. It is the script. And because I used the code and the Bible to decode this reality, now I look at this place, and everything that I look at is cut, turn, union, flow, the sine wave, the sin wave, flesh versus spirit, red versus blue. It's just the same repeat every day, and it actually gets very boring. So then when it gets that boring, you say, well, Lord, what's going on? Well, and he has to show you it's a worship service. So it's just worship service. And while you're down here, he says, serve one another. The greatest among you is a servant. So the reason for being down here is service. Serve one another. Worship God. When you get to heaven, you're going to get a new body and you're going to be like the angels, but higher than the angels. You're going to be worshiping God. And people say, well, I don't want to just go to heaven and it'd be boring. Well, I promise you, after you hit so many years, you're going to get bored with this place too. The same repeat happening over and over. And I don't care how many, like these narcissistic Jezebel harlots, I don't care how many people they chase, that's going to get old too. And they'll never be happy because they're not going to God. They're not getting their identity out of God. They're trying to get their identity out of people and impress people. Excuse me. Like my first wife, she wouldn't, like that guy there, he's a delivery driver over at the restaurant. His car, the front end's broke, but he don't have a payment. My ex-wife wouldn't drive that. No girl I ever dated, girlfriend, they wouldn't drive a junk car. It's paid for. Yeah, but I want something that looks good. It's paid for. You don't have a payment. I like my freedom. Excuse me. Because it's always about outward show and image. That's my point. The flesh creature, so this is tying it all together. The flesh creature is outward show. They don't dig deep. They're not introspective. They can't look inside. Just like the engineer looks at the forces under the bridge, the flesh creature just looks at the bridge, the surface. So the flesh creature just looks at surface and how their clothes, you know, like these are work pants, and I can't even walk out the door before I get that's like Clorox right there. I can't help but when I walk out the door, I get dirt on my clothes. They worry about their clothes, their image, their show, their outward show, their fancy whatever, car, house, whatever. Instead of working on the internal. Like somebody left this and I said, you know, that is a good tool for building your, like, I've got this, you know, I think I bought it online thinking it was going to be good, but I don't like it. I would rather use something like this, and it was free. I don't even remember, I bought that at Walmart. This is free, and this is better. Something fancy versus something simple and cheap. This is better. It's softer to the hand. You can actually move it around, and this here is just one motion, right? It actually, if you do it long enough, it hurts your hand. This here does the same thing, but it looks silly and stupid and cheap, but it works better than this. And so most people are stuck on their hair, their clothes, their outward show, but their heart is corrupt. Instead of being pleasers of God in their heart, they're pleasers of man. They got to please their mama, their daddy, their image, their family bloodline, their outward show. It's all got to look good, so the family bloodline follows that. But they're not even happy. These people, I found out that these kind of people, they're usually drinking because they're trying to keep up that image. They usually have flying monkeys. They always worry about what people say. They never do introspection. They always have to project and blame other people. Like I say, my brother-in-law, he was talking big talk, but he didn't even know he didn't know how the current flowed in the wires, you know. But he was big and bad. But he didn't even know he knew how to put it in the wall. But he didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And so this is my point. I've watched it my whole life, and I just go about my business. I'm quiet, calm, cool, collective. I learned all these trades, but I've decoded down under the surface. And everybody's talking surface. And if you try to talk below the surface, the hidden realm, they call you crazy because you think deeper. And so you become ostracized because you're so high above the surface level stuff that they call you crazy because they just can't understand what you're saying. So this is true with the born again. That's why 1 Corinthians chapter 1, he says, God uses the weak things of the world to confound the wise. He uses the foolish things of the world to show that the worldlings, God's foolishness is higher than man's wisdom. God's weakness is higher than man's strength. And God uses the foolish things to confound the wise. And so most people don't care about their heart. They care about what other people think about them. And they're never happy. They fumble relationships, they fumble jobs that they were happy in just because they worry about what people think, you know. And it just keeps repeating.